Today I'm working on a very loose abstract painting and also a hummingbird. Before we get into the painting part, check out these little robins. As the rain was coming down, I noticed there was dozens of robins out in the yard taking an opportunity to clean themselves in the in the muddy puddles. Alright, so let's get this set up a little bit. First things first, I have Strathmore multimedia paper taped to the wall, and I've already gessoed the paper with a light coated gesso. You don't have to do that. Acrylic paint will work just fine on this paper, but I like to prep it with gesso because I feel like it does make the surface a little better for painting, at least to my taste. Primary goal today was to work on some hummingbird paintings. I have a commission for a hummingbird, and I've actually never painted one before. So this big flat background on the right is actually not for the hummingbird. I also wanted to try to stay loose and do a very intuitive, instinctive abstract painting, kind of like a warm-up, and make sure that when I started doing the hummingbird at some point, I wasn't too tight. So even here, I feel like I'm already really tight, not very free, and starting to, it almost feels like you're forcing the strokes a little bit to me. And so the goal of this whole painting was just to let go, right? Just add layers, just experiment, play over the course of the day and even into the next day that happened. I've done this before, and so I kind of knew what to expect. I wonder sometimes, is it better to start really loose and tighten up near the end, or start really tight and get looser, or is it better if you just were loose the whole time? And I think that's probably the goal for me. But at any rate, this is my process. This is what I do. I'm thinking the whole time, what kind of marks am I making? Are these interesting? Do they remind me of anything? Am I seeing something new that I've never done before? Trying not to plan very much. Even when I do plan, I keep in the back of my mind that I can always cover over these things. So if I have to just get something out, just get it out. Not really focus too much on, is this a finished piece of work? Is this going to be a finished masterpiece or a piece of art that someone would even like or enjoy or want to pay for? And I try to force those thoughts out of my mind and just focus on the activity of painting. I'd like to talk a little bit about what the process is here. I think that I go into this knowing that I have a few sort of tools in my repertoire. I want to use flat patches of color. I also want to use thick and thin lines. And I have a general concept of the colors that I want to use. I know that I like, in these situations, a lot of contrast, a lot of primary colors. So of course I'm going to be using blues and reds, yellow, and obviously black and white, as you can see here. And I'm thinking of artists that I've seen in the past, like Moreau. I'm thinking of Kandinsky. I'm thinking of Basquiat. I'm not, again, trying to think too much and try to have too much of a planned process, but I do have a general sense of the things that are probably in my subconscious that I've observed over all the years of studying art, looking at art, thinking about art. So it's this balance of having all of those things in my mind at the same time, trying to let go and just let these things unfold intuitively, if that makes sense. Also I'm thinking about different ways of applying the paint. I actually know in my mind I want to try using different sizes of brushes and using the palette knife and scraping into the paint, and I know that I can get some pretty interesting textures, and I don't have to do anything really special to build up layers and create something interesting to look at. keep in mind the whole time I'm doing this, the original goal is just to stay loose. And at some point I probably forget that and actually stop thinking at all, which is awesome. And I feel like I personally lose time. You know, it feels like a time traveling experience where I go into a zone of sorts and then I sort of come out the other side and forget where I was and what I was doing. And it's kind of an awesome feeling. And it does achieve the goal, you know, intended, which is I don't want to be tight when I start trying to paint something that is a mixture of representational or realistic art or subject matter. You know, my artwork is abstract. There, you know, when I'm painting a subject like a bird, it has to sort of look like what it's intended to be. And I think that part of the problem for me is that I tend to tighten up and try to make things look too perfect or too exact or something. And with abstract painting, it definitely doesn't work. You know, that doesn't work. It needs to be loose. So another thing I wanted to mention here is that as I'm doing these types of exercises, I often start to see images coming out of the paintings. So I see faces and figures and landscapes and all sorts of strange stuff, and you know that interrupts the process sometimes. And in this case, I just kind of avoid trying to enhance those things and trying to turn this painting into something. I think that this type of painting is more interesting when it's left more open for interpretation, and I think it's interesting to hear what other people, you know, might see as they're looking at something like this. Every single viewer probably sees something different, and I think that's fascinating. So if you see something in this work or any work that I do and want to comment on it, feel inclined, please do. I'd love to hear what you think about stuff and what you see when you look at things like this. And you know, good, bad, or ugly, it's all good. Just, I would say, take note that what you see in these images probably says more about you than it does about me. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. Now, having said all that, I do take a step back and observe these things and think to myself, this has value for me as far as loosening up and just getting sort of in the right mindset. But at the same time, I think, well, what could I do with this one day? Is there something interesting here? Is there a new series that I could be working on? Or is this a technique that I could use in some way stylistically to enhance my work? Could I take this exercise, as I've done in the past, and just create a bunch of chaotic random shapes, but then try to pull something out of them that is completely, you know, easily recognizable? So again, the main point of this whole thing was to try to loosen up so that I could try and paint a hummingbird for the first time and not have it feel tight and just prescriptive, for lack of a better term. You know, here I am, I moved straight from this crazy, chaotic, abstract, loose painting to trying to paint a hummingbird. And I've looked at lots and lots of photographs of hummingbirds at this point to try to figure out, you know, the general pose and color scheme and look that I'm going for. And I had a good idea, and I just wanted to make sure that I could stay very loose in that process. And I feel really good about where it ended up. And you know, this is only one of a bunch that I did, and my next video is probably gonna be showing all those. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I'm excited about, you know, where I'm gonna be able to take these. Yeah, so here's the overall of the crazy abstract loose painting that I mostly focused on in this video. And you know, at the end of the day, I do look at it as a finished piece of art, thinking to myself, well, is it done? And maybe, you know, it could be. This is some great advice that I got from my mentor, Frank Ford. I mentioned him before in other videos, but he had a great perspective, which is, you know, set it aside, work on the sequel, come back later and see how you feel. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate all the support. See you next time. Peace.